He wrote this book to identify historical genesis of white wealth and power and Black poverty and powerlessness. Second, based upon conclusions from historical analysis, to use white society as a model and recommend strategies that Blacks can adopt in order to gain competitive wealth and power. Did you learn anything new from reading this book? And did it introduce you to any new points of views or concepts?
I learned more details to things I already knew. I would say, like, he got really in depth with the farming and the land giving away parts. I didn't know to such detail what happened with the Indians, or I don't like that he called them Indians a lot, but considering the time, it made sense. The Native Americans. New points of view, not particularly, but that might be because I'm from Detroit and we're majority Black, and everything he's saying we should do, we kind of did in that city until other stuff happened. But I was kind of brought up in this mindset to begin with.
Right. Well, I didn't get a chance to read the book, but I did read a little bit about the author, and I saw the video, and the video really took me back because you often hear that the country was founded based on religious freedom. And I'm probably older than most of you guys, and I remember that in my history books. And for him to say that it really wasn't religious freedom, it stemmed from economics, and everything that we read has economics in the background. That reinforced something that I heard before, but it was kind of new to me, because we think about social justice and we think about all these other things that are on the peripheral, but at the heart of it, it all comes down to the mighty dollar.
So the Emancipation Proclamation and subsequent constitutional amendments legally freed all Blacks and granted them citizenship. But without social and economic resources, these newly granted rights amounted to little more than paper rights. Dr. Claud Anderson stressed viewing America's race problem from an economical and political perspective rather than moral and social. Does anyone have any strong opinions or thoughts on that statement?
I don't want to sit here and just say, oh, I agree most of the book, but I will say that, yeah, I don't disagree with the statement in any type of way. And I will say that my main reason is because coming up, the way I formulated the civil rights when I was learning it was that pretty much we would have had what we wanted if we didn't base our alignment on religion. And I used to say this a lot because the Martin Luther King method was appealing to moral and social aspects and values, right? The axing and the protesting. And Malcolm X was more like, just get it how you live. Like, bring your own community, have your own rules, and in that community, you can build based off the same rules that they're pretending to give you, the same government structure that they pretend to give you. You can make that work for you, or you can ask them for their help continuously.
People want to join a movement after they've seen it succeeding, not necessarily join it and help create it, or they become impatient with it and they say, no, this is taking too long. But I mean, with anything in nature, it doesn't happen. I mean, what's the quote? Rome wasn't built in a day. Same thing with the trees outside. They didn't grow in a year, or it took years. And it's the same thing with when you're trying to dismantle a system that was specifically put in place to keep you in the back. It's going to take time. So yeah.
And that makes me think even understanding the system, okay, he's giving the context of slavery, and he's saying these Europeans aren't necessarily friends, but they can put everything aside when it comes to colonizing Africa, colonizing America, keeping Haiti in their place, right? So it's the teams are already established. And I mean, it is what it is. I really would like a kumbaya world, but I mean, looking at the history, it seems like there is a color divide. And it seems like the roles have been assigned to darker skinned people are the oppressed, and the lighter skinned people are the ones that are just wealthy and they're the leisure class. And that's just kind of how it is. So I think, almost you could look at it they talk about Europeans having the forked tongue. So I feel whenever they're talking to you on a moral or a social level, you just got to be very careful, because in their mind, especially in the beginning, they're talking about God, glory, and gold.
Civil rights social rights, and integration cannot produce group wealth and power. Just remember that.
Personally, I think for the most part, we're remaining stagnant. And this is from an educational standpoint, this is what I say. When you look at the education system, right, it's built in such a way that this is where our students go to develop and mature into who they'll be as adults. And when I look at what's happening, I don't think our Black students or minority students are truly given the opportunity, or equal opportunity rather, to develop and to grow and to mature into that valuable person that will add to society in a positive way. Now, of course, we have those students who mom or dad have already been exposed, right? So they have a different path to chart. But as it relates to the general Black population in our education system, I feel that we are more so remaining stagnant, because the policies that are being created for the education system really does not positively impact the Black community.
So I think he did give he said this was, I didn't get to read the last chapter too much in depth, but a sense of community. And the sense of community and a change of mindset is an absolute necessity, because I was saying earlier how I used to, when I left the city, I used to talk to a lot of Black people I met, and I was like, we should just move to our own state. And it's enough for us. We just have our own state. We be our own governor and da-da-da. And the amount of people who told me, but then the white people don't like it. Or Black people kill each other. Black people hurt each other, as if all people don't do these things, is absolutely ridiculous, right? So Black people have inherited this disdain for themselves and their community, and don't apply it to themselves. So we can't build a sense of community. Without that sense of community, we can't even climb in the rungs that are allowed to us. Like, some of these laws are written very vaguely, but we can take advantage of them if we allow ourselves to do so, if we make ourselves the people, you know what I'm saying, who have the say on it, who has the interpretation for it. We're subjected to these laws and the interpretation that a judge has or a lawyer may have to it, but we are not the lawyers and we're not the judges in our own communities. We pay taxes to people who make decisions, not for us, but for everybody else. So I think that's like the number one tool that we need to, get better as a community. We need to stop looking down on Black people who haven't did whatever you did, and you need to move back to those areas and just build from there and see what's really going on through other people's perspective.
Yeah.
I mean, even just like the nature of our relationships, men and women, how we relate, trust. I mean, I hear a lot of the time, females aren't anything, men aren't anything, right? That's what I'm saying.
Gotcha.
And just how we love each other, that's important. How we communicate, how we don't maybe shout when we're frustrated, and we try to actually have the understanding. I mean, there's a lot of behavior we have that's very trauma induced that we have to address. But also just the vision, like, okay, where do we want to go?
Financial intelligence. What do I mean? How to use credit, how to use a credit card, how to borrow money, how to invest money. And I don't mean being Warren Buffett, but I mean, how to use your money and have your money work for yourself. Because it seems that we have the highest number of paycheck to paycheck, type families. How do you save that 3 to 6 months worth for emergency funds? Do you lease or do you buy? Those type of tools, those financial tools that we aren't taught in high school and we aren't taught in college.
Educating people on what to do with our finances, because that's when we start to build that generational wealth. And that is a way to protect Black families.
Point that I want to come back to, I believe one of the young ladies made it today, and that was about sense of community. That is an absolute magnificent resource that we must take into account with this whole entire discussion. It is not just about financial wealth. It is not just about dollars. It is not about being able to buy the house versus the car. It's about generational passing down to the next generation to give them a start, to give the next person a start. It's not just about the dollar. It's about making sure that when we do get into certain places, that we have the power to extend to the next fellow man within our community.
As long as Black people keep getting into this area where they make more money and then leave their community to go in these better communities, your previous community would never get better.
For me, it's really about representation.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I have a passion for education because without education, I would not be where I am. And when I look in the education system, like, you know, where I work, I'm one Black man out of 165 people in a building, right? Educators in a building. And then when you look at the idea of saying, okay, cool, we're talking about diversity, but at the end of the day, we have everyone at the top is white, and then you're saying at the table, you're representing us. Nah, you cannot represent us because you've never experienced our struggle.
No, we don't all come from the same socioeconomic background. We don't all have the exact same experiences, but on some base level, we do indeed have the shared experience or the shared trait quality of being Black in America. So I just feel like that might build the community that Alex has been talking about, that might build the progress that we've been talking about.
Yeah, I just want to tag on to that to say representation and engagement. One of the things that we've seen effective in the Denver area is when we're bringing our engineers into the rooms, into the classrooms, right? They're talking to students that never knew that, hey, a Black person could be an engineer. I've had an experience where I've had a Black student tell me that my introduction of a Black engineer who was a PhD. Sir, is he an engineer for real? He has a PhD? So I'm just talking about that engagement, that involvement in the day-to-day operations, right? That allows the next generation to actually see things that they've never seen before, so they could aspire to get to things that they would not have aspired to because they have not seen it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's even with the education, and then just that visual, allowing them to see that this is possible, you know, so that the things like hearing Black on Black crime or just that Black people are this, and that being the only thing they ingest, replacing that with something more positive. That is definitely something NSBE can do and has done over years to change the mindset of young Black future engineers, current engineers, and even just professionals who feel like that it's so far out their reach. Does anyone else? All right, so now we're gonna just talk about final thoughts. How did anyone, feel about the book, feel about the discussion? Before we take off, were there any last kind of comments anyone wanted to make at all?
Hey everyone, it's Cherie. Just wanted to say this was my first time attending the NSBE Create session, but I really enjoyed it. I did not read the book, but I enjoyed all of the conversations. One of the things that stood out to me is a sense of community, and looking out for folks that are not necessarily, I guess they don't necessarily know what to ask for. So I guess in NSBE, I had a situation where I basically got my job through NSBE and then bounced, after graduation. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily know to give back to community. So it's a matter of looking out for folks and sharing information that that they are not necessarily knowing that they should ask for, if that makes sense. So I only have NSBE as a community that I tap into, but I don't have like a sorority that I can connect with. So I don't know how we actually bring that community together so that we know, okay, this person knows about gardening or this person knows about finances, and we just kind of bring it together. But maybe that's what NSBE Create is, and this is where I come to get that information.
No, exactly. And I mean, I think you are an example of one of the things that NSBE is doing right. You attended an NSBE conference, received a job, and you said you bounced, but now you're here and you're on a regional board for NSBE. And you want to do that, give back to the community, because you understand the importance of not just being a Black engineer and not just receiving a job at a conference, but also helping those people that come after you and making sure that they understand, one, that the importance of their education, the importance of their knowledge, and them understanding their wealth, and the also just the important segments of just being Black in America, doing those things like, okay, now that you have this job that's paying you 6 figures, what do you do with those finances? Or when you walk into a room and you feel imposter syndrome, how do you navigate that space? And those are all the things that NSBE do. So yeah, Cherie, thank you for coming back and joining the NSBE board. I was in the same situation where when I graduated, got my job, I was like, all right, cool, appreciate that, NSBE. But NSBE is one of those things that has changed my life. So me coming back just was, it had to happen. So no, thank you. And then thank you for coming. I know you said this is your first time, so I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, actually, so there's one person that we have not heard from. Dr. Toomer, do you have any final thoughts that you want to add? If not, just a general call, anybody else, yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Anybody else? Alex? No?
Yeah,
Mariah?
you do, Alex. You got
It was a very interesting book. I liked it. It gave me more facts to make my arguments that I like to make on a daily basis. So, and the discussion was good. I did want to comment on the was it representation thing? I agree that we need more representation. However, I personally, and this is just my personal opinion, I like to try to reinforce the idea that nobody else needs to have done something for you to do it, rather than you can look like you can be this because this person does it. Like, I'm an engineer and I'm Black, so you can be an engineer. Just do whatever you want to do. Because I never saw a Black engineer. I just decided I wanted to do it, and it was gonna get done regardless. I like to enforce that more so than like, this president was Black, so you can do it now, or you don't have to be the first at everything. Just know because you are you and you want to do this, it's going to get done. I like to reinforce that.
Nice.
Can I respond to that real quick?
She's coming for you, Ramesh.
No, I say that because I'm that student, right? Who from a really poor background. So engineering conversations never had in my family. We never had that. So up until grade 10 in high school in Jamaica, I never had someone to say, hey, what do you want to do? How do you get there? And it was me watching something and a teacher saying, yo, Ramesh, you've been failing this class all year long. This is the last. Why are you here? And I was like, you know what? I kind of like that. I saw this thing on the TV about engineering. And it is that conversation from that point that had me redirect everything in 2 years, leaving high school with all my subjects to be able to get into college. And that teacher is now an awesome friend. So it doesn't have to say you need to become an engineer. It's that exposure to something else that you've never seen. And that's my reason. Because if we never had that conversation at that time in grade 10 in high school, where would I be today?
Right.
Well, I just wanted to add to that representation does matter, because it's not only you wanting to do something, but for example, like my guidance counselor in high school told me to do something less challenging. So if I'm not saying that I did see an engineer, I just had the support from my parents to say, okay, yes, go ahead and do this. But even though you had the motivation or the thought process to say, oh, I do want to be an engineer, there are folks out there that don't want you to take that path. So it's just, something to think about.
No, definitely. And I mean, again, with this book discussion, we're going to have different opinions. Some people are more gung-ho and just like, you know what, I don't actually need to see a Black engineer. I just know what I want to do and I want to apply myself in this way and I'm going to go do it. And sometimes growing up and not seeing that at all and having that exposure kind of leads you more in that direction. So to kind of sum it up, I think that NSBE does a good job at being that representation. NSBE does a good job at divulging into the education and just showing people that, one, if you want to become an engineer, you can, but if you don't, you can also get into consulting, or if you want to attend grad school, if you want to get more education, NSBE kind of taps into all those pieces. So yeah, I think everyone is coming with great points, is what I was trying to say.